Welcome. Thank you for attending this webinar on the growing food in the classroom. My name is Craig Ferdine. I'm the Alaska Chair for the Association for Learning Environments. We are happy to have Dan and Katie here today to provide us with this wonderful webinar. We'd like to first thank our sponsors for this year, and then just a couple ground rules for the webinar. Please keep your lines muted. And then if you have questions during the presentation, feel free to use the chat function to send it to them. And they will either answer them as they go, or most likely we'll collect them and answer them at the very end. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Dan and Katie. Thank you for attending.
Hello, everybody. So if we don't know you personally, then you're probably wondering who are Dan and Kate. So I'm Dan Perpich. I'm with a company called Hydroponics based here in Anchorage. And we specialize in making hydroponic growing systems. And
I'm Katie Croft. I'm a science teacher for the Anchorage School District, currently teaching at the elementary level at Airport Heights.
So this is the brief agenda of what we're going to be talking about today. I just like to stress we want this to be informative and informal and helpful to you. So please, if you have questions, you get in the chat and you type them in there, and we'll look at them and we'll try to answer them either ongoing or at the end. And towards the end, we'd like to facilitate a discussion around the questions and after we get done with what we want to talk about, then we really want to talk about what's on your mind. So if you do have questions or comments throughout, let us have them.
All right, so this is Katie. I am a teacher currently at Airport Heights Elementary. We're located in Anchorage, Alaska. We're a Title I school that serves about 330 students on any given year. My position at the school is somewhat unique. I teach a pull-out class, which means I get every classroom in the school for 1 hour a week. My class is called Exploration, and it's an opportunity for students to engage in hands-on science-based learning experiences. We do a lot of STEM work, and we have a large school garden that we are growing from year to year, and that's a major part of what I do in my exploration class as well. My goal is to really engage our students as learners to help them see how the skills that they're learning in their classrooms bridge to more real-life experiences. So this is I've finished 2 years in that position at Airport Heights. I'm going into my third here. So last year we were lucky enough to get in touch or get connected with Vertical Harvest, and we piloted or got to use a prototype of their cabinet hydroponic system. And Dan will tell you more details about what it is and what it's actually called. But it was a fantastic opportunity. I championed it for our school. It seemed to fit in well with what I was doing in my exploration class. So when we first got the system, I'm a science teacher, but I have zero experience with hydroponics or anything like that. I'd never done anything like it before. So Dan came in and helped orient me, showed me how to use the system. It was pretty easy to figure out. And so the first quarter that we had it, I got my students involved in planting seeds, and we grew them in the unit. The unit was placed in our school right in the main hallway, so it's the first thing people see when they walk through the door, entering the school, and kids and teachers are walking by it all day, every day. So I got students involved in planting the seeds and getting them put into the system, but I did all of the work in terms of maintaining the plants, adding the nutrients. I treated that first quarter as a learning experience for myself just to figure out the ins and outs of the system, working out the kinks and things like that. But the students loved seeing the various things growing. We grew some basil that first round, and it filled the whole hall. Every time we'd harvest it, it filled the whole hall with basil smell. People loved it. But after that first quarter, I felt more comfortable with the system and was able to train 2 teams of 5th graders on how the system worked, and got them involved in maintaining the water levels, adding the nutrients, harvesting, choosing what kinds of plants went in. So it was still a smaller, it was about 10 students total who were involved in that effort on a week-to-week basis. So still smaller, but it was fantastic. The students who were involved, I'm still learning the system, so we learned together. There were some mistakes made. We learned that when the plants are great big, doing well, they can't go an entire week without water being put in the system. So we had a great big die-off over spring break last year, and our bok choy was wilted. But it was amazing to see how many of the plants did bounce back after we threw some water in there. And then we had a problem harvesting. One day, one of the students yanked at a bok choy plant with a little bit too much gusto, and we didn't realize he jiggled the tray off of the system, so water started leaking out. And a couple hours later, the administrative assistant came into my room to inform me the whole hallway was flooded. But again, these experiences were great in terms of learning for the kids and for me. Just seeing how just troubleshooting, I was able to get kids involved with troubleshooting what the problem was, figuring it out. The real world problem solving opportunities were really valuable that working with the system afforded our students. Oops. Oh, thank you.
There we go.
We were able to hit on a lot of different skills with the system. So the students who worked with this directly needed to learn how to work as a team, how to communicate with each other. There were several different jobs involved. They had to decide who was going to do what. And again, that process was ugly sometimes, but they really authentically learned these skills. They had to record data. They kept track of how much water was added when, what quantity of nutrients were added when, all sorts of different things like that. It was great actually on a broader level for my classes, my larger classes. It was a good way to tie in what we were learning about plant life cycles. And we were able to cook whole entire classrooms. We were able to cook with some of the crops that we grew. There's a picture there you can see of pizzas we made with some of the basil margarita pizzas, and the students were raving about that until the end of the year. They really loved that. So one thing that I'm thinking about for next year is what other crops we can grow to involve more students in cooking. So the school did end up purchasing a unit, and we're looking forward to using that this year. And I've got lots of ideas about how we can continue and expand the program. My little teams of students worked out great, and I'm looking for ways to upscale that and get more kids involved directly with maintaining the system. One thing that I'm talking about with my principal is establishing partnerships with local restaurants to sell herbs to them to generate revenue that could support our school garden, and perhaps, depending on how well we were able to do with it, some after-school clubs. There's lots of opportunity to use this system for our science fair. We have just about 100% participation in our science fair every March, and I think there's just endless possibilities. We could set up experiments in there. And one of our, a tradition we have at our school is to start plants to sell. It's a big fundraiser for us. And this unit's going to provide a great place to start our starts. That'll go into a heated greenhouse that we just had built as well. So we're, the learning will continue. I'm sure that I'm going to make more mistakes going forward. But again, I think learning through those mistakes is, it's just fantastic for students to see that, to build resilience and, take ownership for what we've got going on in our school. So, I mentioned on some of the things that it does, things that my students learned, it definitely connects with next generation science standards and state standards as well, learning expectations for science, engineering, and math for sure. One of my favorite math concepts that we hit a lot was proportions, ratios, dealing with the amount of nutrients that needed to be added. The students had to look into the container, estimate how much water was needed, and then figure out how many scoops of nutrients to put in. And it was challenging for them at first, but week after week they got better and better at it. So it was neat to see them develop that skill through practice with this.
Katie, could you, before we go on, could you maybe speak a little bit about the next generation science standards themselves and sort of what's required of you as an educator now and how this stuff can integrate with it?
Yeah, so the next generation science standards they're a national set of standards that have not been formally adopted by the state of Alaska. The Anchorage School District does refer to the standards and to make sure that our learning experiences, science learning experiences, are aligned with these standards. And the standards are set up a little bit differently than our state standards are. On the bottom of the list, you'll see cross-cutting concepts. And those are concepts that, they hit just about any science content across grade levels as well. And so just that the concept of cause and effect, systems and system models, it hits, working with the hydroponic system fits in with that really, really well. And I put on there some of the disciplinary core ideas as well, just in terms of plant life cycles, the engineering and design process there as well. And science and engineering practices overlay all of these things as well. And so the data collection we were able to do was really neat. Kids were I forced them to look at the data we collected and make decisions based on that, in terms of how much water and when, how long it took things to grow, and use that to inform our decisions for how to do things differently with our next round of planting. So working with the system provided a lot of opportunities to hit these standards.
So we've got a question that's, aside from STEM, what other teaching opportunities are out there? Economics, marketing, etc.
Yeah, and that's something I'm hoping to the economics and marketing especially is something I'm looking at for this upcoming year. So when I was speaking about starting up partnerships with local restaurants, I would definitely want to get kids involved in that. It was something I was pondering this morning, actually. Having them come up with ways to market our herbs to specific restaurants, So doing a little bit of market research with groups of kids. What is it that you think they might need? Having kids communicate directly with people. We've got a bakery in our neighborhood that would be a good option, and my principal has got some connections to restaurant owners in Anchorage here, and so I definitely want to get them, students involved in that. We have, with our school garden, had students involved with selling plants and collecting money. I think the opportunities here can go even deeper than that. So having students, examine the cost of seeds, calculating the cost of the energy that it takes to run the system, and figuring out what our profits actually are, considering those variables. And I'd like to give students ownership over some of those funds, so have them decide, what is it that you would like to use these funds for? What can you think of that would make our school a better place? To give them even more ownership over that. So again, we didn't do that last year, but I'm looking at that for next year.
So now we'll kind of shift gears a little bit, and I'll try to go through my slides and sort of a high-level overview. I don't want to get into a discussion on who we are, because I think what we're most excited to talk about is, what are the opportunities here in the classroom. So VH Hydroponics is a smart farming company based in Anchorage, Alaska. And we started about 4 years ago with a vision that everyone should have access to fresh food. And over the years, we've developed a series of smart farming technologies that are in use in the Arctic, in Alaska, in Canada, and in the Pacific Northwest. And we produce everything from large commercial hydroponic farms that, they're commercial scale production for farmers and entrepreneurs, down to the cabinets, which you've seen in Airport Heights now. We're a very passionate group. All of us founding partners are very aligned that this is important, and we are absolutely thrilled to have been able to work with Airport Heights. It's just been a tremendous experience overall, and it's been for us, we just get a lot of personal fulfillment seeing them so excited about it. It's just very energizing. We started because we saw a major problem in the produce supply chain. I don't know how many of you out there in the interwebs are from the Arctic, but if you are, I wouldn't have to tell you, how expensive produce is when you go to the store. And when it comes down to it, North America, most of it is born in California, Mexico, Florida, and the further away you get from those places, the more expensive it becomes. And so you can see here in this graphic that Alaska is entirely red. And for us, we try to focus our attentions in the red, the purple, and somewhat in the yellow areas on the map to simplify things. These are some photos of our commercial technologies. So these are 40-foot shipping containers, professionally engineered system. This particular system is above the Arctic Circle, grows for market. You can see in some of the photos the quality of the produce is our commercial clients there. What energizes us about them is that they just get so excited when their customers see this stuff, because small restaurateurs in small communities on the Arctic Rim, they normally don't have access to this kind of food, and they get very excited about it. And we've heard it from chefs, from supermarkets. They're just energized. So as a STEM webinar here, I want to talk a little bit about how it works, the commercial systems, and how hydroponics works. If anyone out there is a hydroponics expert, I'm sure you can tell me a myriad of ways to improve it, but this is how we do it. We use a technique called nutrient film technique, and what we do is we run nutrient-rich water over the root mass of the plants. We give them carbon dioxide supplementally, and then we use artificial LED lighting. It's very important to us that the systems work in remote places, so we use very high-end equipment as top of the line as we can get, and we're constantly focused on doing that. That top graphic, if you look at it from the top down, that is the 40-foot shipping container. You've got a grow room with 6 unique growing racks. Each rack will hold 300 plants, so you have 1,800 mature plants total. In the control room on the left, the top little box represents the main reservoir, which is about a 500-gallon tank. On top of that sits the reservoir management, so the nutrients, and then the seedling area, in which you have room for another 1,600 baby plants. All told, the system has capacity for 3,400 plants, and everything is housed inside. So when it goes out into a small, tiny community in the Arctic, you really just sort of run the wires and unpack things and get water in it, and you're ready to go. And although we normally will work with our customers on site for a week, you're really up and running in a couple days. And so that can be very impactful. Instead of having to do a massive building project out on the edge of the world, instead it's a shipping container. It shows up, you put it on some 8x8s, or you get it off the ground, and you really just run the wires and it's ready to go. Now the bottom graphic is a little bit more detail how it works. So we have a very robust automation system that controls all the HVAC systems, which is, air intake and outtake, carbon dioxide, humidity levels, temperature. That same system is also linked to our nutrient system. So we have 3 nutrient tanks. We like to use 2-part nutrient solutions just because they tend to be much better for the plants. And then we also use a buffering agent for the commercial systems, which is phosphoric acid. And it's the best product that you can get on the market. And it's not an acid like you spill it on your skin and your hand falls off. It's Coca-Cola is more acidic than the stuff that we use. And we have a system to test the water and test for the levels of these various items sort of at a real-time basis, and then it doses accordingly to keep them at the right levels. That main tank is then, we circulate the water over the plant root mass. It comes down to an accumulator and is pumped back into the main tank. And, we give light through, that's actually the easiest thing to do, is basically switch them on and off. And that's all managed at that central automation system. System's compatible with any electric grid. If you have dirty power in a community, we have products that'll clean that up and keep it from damaging any of the sensitive electronics. The water generally will last a week to 2 weeks, although as Katie mentioned, the bigger the plants get, the more water they use. So in steady state, about once a week is good. If it is warm outside and very dry and you're getting a lot of humidity going away, then you may have to fill the water twice a week. The HVAC system is modular. We work in the very small communities, so places where an electric powered HVAC unit, where like a heat pump or something similar like that, probably wouldn't make sense financially. So in that case, we'll use ventilative cooling. We'll use in the summer, and then we'll use heating oil heating systems in the winter. And our whole philosophy has always been, we want to make this as easy as possible for people. So as turnkey as we can get it, that's our goal. And this is commercial scale production. So you're talking 400 to 500 plants a week, which is roughly 200-ish to 250 pounds of produce per week. And, that's much more, unless you have a very, very large family. I wouldn't imagine that you'd be using that just for personal consumption. We also have developed a series of cabinet products. On the left, you'll see one that's in use at the University of Alaska. Their student union keeps it sort of front and center, and then they use the produce and various products that they various projects they're doing. On the right is some of the things that we've grown. Those are chives and beans. It's hard to say what's the breadth of things that can be grown in this system, because at this point we've probably grown well over 100 different plants. That's just a guess, and we're constantly testing to see what else works. In our office here in Anchorage at the moment, we have one of these systems. It's sitting right behind us, and it's got more green beans than I think we really know what to do with. So we'll figure that out. The system is fairly similar. We've got a large one and a small one. The one in these photographs carries about 114 plants. The smaller one will carry 66 plants. Again, we tried to simplify things. LED lighting. The electricity is much simpler than the commercial systems. You just plug it into a wall. Standard 120 volt outlet. Won't blow your breakers, won't blow fuses. All you really need is clean tap water, and there is some nuance there, of course. If you're having issues on site, then we can always test your water and figure out what's going on. It works the same way as the commercial systems, just at a smaller scale. So instead of having the robust automations, this is much more hands-on as you scale down. But what we've found is that many of our partners enjoy that aspect of it and get a lot of fulfillment out of it. Of course, the HVAC is much more simpler. These units don't come with temperature control or any of those things. These are using the air that's inside the building. And generally speaking, for this type of production, that's perfect. So this is a demo system at the Anchorage Museum. They've been using this for, I'd say, about a year and change. I think we gave that to them back in June of last year. And you can, if you're in Anchorage, I'd encourage you to go by and have a look. They keep it in the science learning lab for the various classes and children that come through there. And then a lot of the animals they have at the Anchorage Museum have special dietary considerations. So they eat pretty well there. The turtle, Chomper, very large snapping turtle, gets to eat better produce than a lot of people in Anchorage, believe it or not. we're all a bit jealous of him. I've got a 2.5-year-old son who loves watching turtles, so we get endless joy out of that. So where are we? This is just a mix of our customers, and in all honesty, we're starting to lose track of where some of these systems are going, because we'll have customers contact us, we'll send them the equipment, and then the systems are on wheels and they're mobile, and they'll go to lots of different places. We tend to work most with a mix of commercial growers, restaurants, schools, and various consumers. And we love all of them very much and are deeply appreciative of what they're doing. So with that, we're at about the 30-minute mark, and I'd love to hear from the audience and sort of facilitate a discussion. And I'd encourage you to ask whatever's on your mind. because we're here to talk with you, and we want to hear what you're thinking about. So we've got a question. What about funding opportunities? Lisa Murkowski just came out with the Farm Bill. So you want to maybe address how you guys did it at Airport Heights, or is
that is my principal worked that out.
Okay.
And I think I want to guess, but I don't want to guess wrong on being recorded. Mike Webb is the guy to email about that.
What we do know for sure is that they're working on a farm bill, and the general scope, to my understanding, is that it'll allocate $4 million to Alaska to promote local and basically local hydroponics projects. And the general structure is supposed to be a food security micro grant of $5,000 to $10,000 each, which is in range for these cabinets. And I do believe that this farm bill is not just for the state of Alaska. I think the state of Hawaii is going to get a similar piece of it, and more than likely, I believe I saw Idaho on the list, although I could be wrong. And another way to look for money for these may be through the Alaska Community Foundation. I encourage you to, if you are interested, I'd encourage you to reach out. I know they have money available for things like this, so.
Okay, we've got another question here. What do the parents think about the system? So like I said, we had the system set up right next to the front door, and so it was a curiosity to a lot of folks who walked through the door. And some of the parents that I chatted with, there was if I was doing something with the system and parents walked by, they'd almost always stop and ask, what are you growing? And it was a great opportunity for me to talk to them about what we're learning in class and what we're doing at the school. And the parents loved it. I had a couple who offered to volunteer to help. And gosh, we had the kids doing so much, there wasn't much for the parents to actually do, but they were really excited about that. And yeah. It's all right. How many hours within the week did you dedicate to maintaining the system? For us at Airport Heights, it varied depending on how far along the plants were. So when the plants are teeny tiny, it's not much time at all. We were putting water in, refilling the system maybe once a week. And putting the nutrients in, and that was, that was easy. The bigger the plants got, the more times we had to fill it, and harvesting, of course, takes time. Goodness, I never did quantify. I should have quantified the hours, but no more than a couple of hours a week. It wasn't a huge time suck, especially once I learned the system and got that down pat. So another question, can you talk about the connection you're developing between the hydroponics and your upcoming greenhouse? So our school was just renovated, and some of the funds for that, I believe, were used to build the large greenhouse that will be heated with propane. And so one thing that I understand we can do with this system, and perhaps Dan can talk about that a little bit more, is start plants in the system and then transplant them into larger containers and then get them going in another spot. And I'm thinking that this might be a great opportunity. One thing we'd like to do, our gardening club would like to do, is make hanging baskets, hanging flowering baskets to sell at our plant sale. And what we discovered this year is a lot of those flowers that we would like to start, like lobelia and petunias and all of those types of things, are difficult to get going and take a really long time to grow if we've got them just on a windowsill in a classroom. So we didn't get any of those big enough to do our hanging baskets this year. I'm thinking this system might be a really great way to jumpstart a lot of those types of plants. So we'll get them going in the hydroponic system, transplant them into containers, and then get them going in our greenhouse. Our idea right now is to fire up the greenhouse starting in February or March, but we'll see how much fuel we've got. But I don't know, Dan, if you want to talk about.
Well, you know, in the end, hydroponics is a technique to grow plants in a very efficient manner, and greenhouses are places to grow plants, and so you can marry those up very, very, very well. And we've seen it. There's a number of projects that come to mind, but we've seen it just repeatedly. I know if anyone's familiar with Bell's Nursery, for instance, the massive tomato and cucumber plants, those are all hydroponically grown, and he starts them in systems that are actually very similar to what we've got here. You know, if you're going to start something from a seed, you really don't need all that much space right away. So I think the idea of starting in these systems is just a beautiful concept. The other places that I know that are just really cutting edge of marrying the hydroponics to the greenhouses, one that would come to mind would be the Point McKenzie Prison Farm, which, if you're not familiar with that project and concept, it's a tremendous concept in the field of recidivism reduction way out on Point McKenzie, which, you know, an hour and a half outside of Wasilla, really in the middle of nowhere at the end of a dirt road, is a farm where they bring well-behaved inmates to work the farm and grow plants. And the farm manager, and I'm going to give him a shout out here because I think the guy is a complete rock star. He's very humble, and he would never say this himself, but a guy named Adam Boyd out in Wasilla runs that farm. He also runs a potato farm out there. He's just a tremendous gentleman, and he is a master at integrating the hydroponics in the greenhouse. And the results of that project itself are that they take inmates and turn them into actual skilled workers, so that when they're released, they're not just wondering what to do with their life. And it's just a fantastic project. And when we talk about developing connections between hydroponic systems and greenhouses and really growing plants in efficient manners and in all seasons, that stands out to me as just the unequivocal leader at the moment here in the state of Alaska anyway.
Okay, we've got another question. What kind of educational opportunities would you envision at the middle school and high school levels? Is it happening at ASD? Dan, is it happening anywhere else in ASD?
It is, and actually, you know, the one that comes to mind the most is in the North Slope Borough School District. They are integrating these exact same systems into the small communities. So, as opposed to Anchorage, where we've got a large population and a small community of a few hundred people, the K through 12 is generally in the same place, or at least very close to each other. The other place, and this is coming back to Anchorage, would be the King Career Center, where they're integrating these systems as part of teaching their students the trades. So their student base is a bit more advanced than the K through 12, and what they're doing is teaching them the basics of plumbing with the systems, of building. They look at it and they say, what's the best way to build this? You know, they talk about things like what welding techniques do we use with it, and you know, I would say that at the moment, Airport Heights in here in Anchorage is sort of our number one reference point when it comes to integrating into the classroom. But I would imagine that the other schools are definitely interested. You know, I would hope so anyway. I guess I'd actually turn that around back to you and say, who do you know that does it? Because there has to be other school gardens.
Right. There are definitely a lot of school gardens. I'm not sure who else is doing hydroponics, but before I worked for Airport Heights, I was a middle school science teacher, and I can see a lot of opportunity for using a system like this at the middle school level as well. It might be interesting to do experiments related to genetics in there. So doing generations of plants, looking at phenotype of flowers, things like that, could be an interesting use. I don't know if you've ever had anybody do that, but I would look into that. And then, you know, it might be a really neat thing for an after-school, middle school club as well. There's, you know, I could tie it into community service, growing produce and donating it, or using that to meet needs of the community somehow. Of course, there's all that. I mean, the science connections are all there, and we talked about that. And so definitely a neat way to look at a plant growth. It might be neat to run experiments and manipulate variables, seeing what kinds of things grow, or if you play with the amount of light you give them, what effects do you observe, things like that. So there's definitely opportunities, I think, for middle and high level science and math. Oh, okay. So a question about how do school district student nutrition groups feel about using these plants for school lunches? So that is something that my principal and I are talking about. One thing we'd like to try this year is setting up a salad bar at lunches with produce grown in the system. I don't know at the district level how student nutrition would feel about that, so that's definitely research that we need to do. But I can tell you my principal loves the idea. I think it would be doable, and it's something I hope we get to do this year. I don't know if you have any insight on that either, Dan.
I don't know if I have any insights that will be very helpful. I know you know, the products that are most commonly grown in these systems are lettuces and basils because they're fairly resilient and easy to do in it. And one thing that we do know for sure is that, you know, this isn't the iceberg lettuce you're going to get at the store. The nutrition content in these lettuce products would probably actually surprise you. There's a lot more nutrients in well-grown, high-quality head lettuce than you might think. I do know in North Slopeboro that they are eating the produce. I'm not sure if they're integrating it directly into the cafeteria or how they're doing it, but I would imagine that it's starting out similar to what you're doing, where, you know, maybe you make the pizza with it or whatever. And I guess if we do a round two of the hydroponics in the classroom, and maybe we'll try to get them representative from that group on board as well, because what they're doing is also very cool, and we're excited to see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be great to have it at the district level and have some fresher produce available in our lunches for kids, but that's more of a commercial thing.
Let me ask you this. So what's the quality of the food in the lunch program now? I mean, to be honest, it's been longer than I care to tell everybody since I've sat in an elementary school cafeteria and eaten lunch. So,
yeah, I don't know if I can talk about the quality. I don't have any actual data on that, but yeah. I can tell you that at our school it comes in pre-sealed packages, plastic packages, and there's usually a hot portion and then a separate package that has either like canned fruit or fresh vegetables like broccoli or carrots, apples, that kind of thing. I don't know what the quality is like, but I can tell you that the broccoli trays are almost always, they pile up on our school share table. The kids don't usually choose to eat those, but I have seen kids get really excited about trying produce that we have grown in our garden and that we grew in the hydroponic system. So I think when kids see where it comes from, had a hand in actually planting it, watching it grow, that they are a lot more willing to try these vegetables and keep an open mind about that kind of thing. There's another question. Does this system affect the humidity within the school? Would there be concerns about mold within the school? Our school, we ran the system for 3 quarters, right? Almost through, at least half the year, through the winter and then into the spring. We didn't have any problems with humidity. Our school was just redone and has a brand new HVAC system. So I don't know, Dan, maybe you can talk about what the implications for...
Well, I think actually Craig may be the best equipped.
Well, as a mechanical engineer, I could say that these are sealed cabinets. So the humidity wouldn't necessarily, it's not like you have a water fountain sitting in the middle of your hallway. And then children give off a lot of moisture. And then typically in our remote communities where it's really cold out, we have exceptionally dry schools to begin with based on the amount of outside air we bring into the schools. So I wouldn't be worried about humidity from these smaller cabinets. Maybe if you were to do like a larger room of them, then I might, definitely have a mechanical engineer involved in humidity control. But these smaller cabinets, I wouldn't be worried one bit with that.
Yeah. Yeah, we keep one in our office here, and honestly, I just sort of enjoy the fact that the air is a little bit moister than it is outside. I guess we've also got the museum project, and that's we've worked with them over the last period of time. Just starting out, as a company, it's been just tremendously valuable for us to be able to work with the museum and Airport Heights and Katie and just get their feedback on it as we develop the product. I mean, now it's a finished product, of course. But of all the points of feedback, the humidity has never been an issue. It's most of the questions that we get regarding the systems are things are more very basic things, like where do you plant the seeds, how do you operate it? The things about the humidity, that's becomes more of an issue in our commercial systems where we've got 3,200 living or 3,400 living plants with 500 gallons that's circulating and tumbling, and the way plants grow through the transpiration process, they are putting out a set amount of humidity per plant. That becomes larger as the plant becomes larger, and we do have to account for that in our commercial systems. But in the cabinet systems where it's scaled down and you've got 114 plants in the large one, it's just never been much of an issue in the past. Now, if you were to take it down to a place like Houston, Texas, where the humidity levels can be 100%, and then you may see something along, it may become something you want to look at. But what I've learned about places like that is that, when it's highly humid and, then the HVAC systems become more robust. And I apologize to Craig for simplifying it, but to me, it just appears that, the larger the temperature swings, or the more extreme the temperatures, the more expensive the HVAC gets. And so, Craig, I guess I got a question for you, because you've put this together for all of us, and I know that STEM is very near and dear to your heart, and part of the reason, if you guys don't know Craig personally, I highly recommend you reach out to him. And how do you see this stuff integrating STEM into the classroom, just from an outsider's perspective? Where do you see the potential here? Where do you see this thing going?
As an engineer, going into the Association for Learning Environments is very heavily on the classroom side of programming and how to provide the best learning environment for students. And one thing that we have learned, that I personally have learned by being part of this, is that children learn differently. And not all kids can read a book or watch somebody draw something on a chalkboard and understand a concept. So for those individual ideas, is tactile learning? Okay, yeah, good, I got it right. This provides a very different way, a hands-on way of learning and being able to see. It's one thing to read a book and memorize the parts of biology of this and that, but when they're looking at it and they're growing it, and I think this is a really good way to reach out to teach kids with a hands-on, something that they can see, and I think they'll have a much better, they'll learn better by having this hands-on. I think I'm beating that horse to death,
yeah.
But yeah.
And at the end of the process, you see these students when they've all grown up. I mean, you're a professional engineer in a professional setting, so all those newly minted engineers that come to you, they started out in an elementary school some way. So do you see this as being impactful throughout their entire career path, even 25, 30 years down the line?
You always hear that story about what got you interested in whatever field you are. And there's always that spark that, hey, I became a doctor because something or another. They ran across this, their dog got sick, so they became a veterinarian in school. So anything that you can put in front of a student at that young age to get that spark of, wow, I never really knew science was this cool. I was able to eat science. I never was able to figure that out. If that puts them down a path and gets them excited about any field, STEM or otherwise, I'm all for it.
Yeah. Is that your experience with it as well, Katie?
Yeah, for sure. I know one of my favorite moments with the system actually was after we harvested bok choy, and it was neat because you can see the whole plant and the root still attached, and I was able to bring those plants into one of my kindergarten classrooms and lay them out in the middle, and the kids got their hands all over them, and kids who had been struggling with vocabulary, we'd been looking at plants, suddenly were like, oh, that's the roots. And my school is a Title I school. We're just about almost 100% free and reduced lunch, and a lot of these kids don't get these types of experiences. So to be able to give them, such an authentic experience is a lot of fun.
Yeah. What's been your favorite experience with it so far?
I think probably watching my teams of fifth graders manage it and problem solve, and stepping back and listening to their problem solving methods, and trying really hard not to swoop in and say, well, what if you just, but to let them work through and watch them be successful, just watch them persevere, and some of the creative ideas that they came up with. I think that was my favorite.
Are you excited to see, so as the fifth graders that, they're coming back next year, are you excited to, see where it goes going forward? Yeah, like I said, I'm hoping to scale it up so that we can get more teams of students involved in the day-to-day operation of the system. So, yeah.
Well, this has been an amazing webinar, and this is the type of information that we really want to get out to our membership here in Alaska, but also I know we have some Canadians who listen in on these webinars and others in remote and cold environments, and this is exactly the type of thing that we want to provide to you who is listening to this. So if you have other ideas on webinars that we can do, people we can find to talk about subjects that are unique to Alaska or cold regions, by all means, please reach out to us. You can search online for a4le.org, Alaska chapter, and just let us know what you'd like us to see, and we'll go out and we'll find information for it. We are planning on doing a follow-up webinar on this because we know a lot of teachers are out of session today on August 8th. So we will be having a follow-up question opportunity for educators and others as they listen to this webinar. So hang on to your questions, and we'll follow this up with another one.
Yeah. And please reach out with them. The general format for webinar part 2 of hydroponics in the classroom, we're going to try to get actual students that have worked with the systems involved with it. And so if you do have questions, if you're driving home today and something comes to you, or you're talking with your spouse and they ask something that you hadn't thought of and it's interesting to you, please reach out to us and ask those questions, and we'll try to consolidate the best ones we can find and bring those to webinar part 2, and we'll see what we can do to get students involved so you can hear from them how it's impacting their life. On behalf of VH Hydroponics, I want to say thank you to A4LE for putting this together. Craig's done a tremendous amount of work to get this together, and I want to just recognize him, and I want to say thank you to Katie and to the Anchorage School District. It's been just very fulfilling for us to be involved with this, and we're just so energized to see what they're doing over there.
Any last words, Katie?
Yeah, no, happy growing to those of you who decide to try out hydroponics.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for everybody who is with us, and also for those who are going to be watching this separately. We will have this video recording of this available on our website, and so it'll be available to you or anybody else you think would be interested in this longer than we probably even want to think about nowadays, but it'll be out there. So happy growing.